Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for accepting this interview with Simay Azadi. Recently, two political prisoners, PMOI supporters, Behrouz Ehsani and Mehdi Hassani, were executed. And at least 14 other PMOI supporters are on the death row. You are among over 300 personalities who signed a statement. They sent a statement urging the international community to stop their execution, and you later condemned this execution. Can you please elaborate a bit about this situation?
Well, what we see in Iran these days is almost massacres in plain sight, using this judicial system, 5-minute trials behind closed doors, false evidence, charges like enemy of God or terms that don't mean anything in terms of people's actual conduct or criminal conduct, resulting in executions. The UN rapporteur said we may see the largest number this year since the horrendous 30,000 executions that occurred back in 1988. And clearly this regime is using the threat of death through these processes to intimidate and to try to silence the opposition. They're not going after even their foreign enemies. They're going after the domestic opposition, the people that would be elected if Iran was a democracy. And it's absolutely essential that the international community speak strongly, but go beyond words. To effective action to show that there will be accountability for these crimes and that the prospect of justice for the survivors of these victims won't be swept under the carpet, but that also there can really be the expectation that those that are responsible for these mass murders are held to account.
Another thing, you just mentioned the 1988 massacre. One of the things that we had, I think, was the landmark report by Professor Javed Rahman about this massacre, and he specifically underlined that these crimes against the PMOI supporters back in the 1980s amount to crimes against humanity and also genocide. As an expert, what is your opinion about this report, and what should have the international community have done since this report was published and they haven't done it?
Well, it's essential to hold the people responsible for those crimes to account. Obviously, we had people like President Raisi, who led those executions, who's no longer with us. But there are thousands of others that have moved into positions in this regime that are responsible for those crimes, and some who may be abroad, and some who may have assets abroad. They need to be held accountable. The professor is clear these are international crimes, and in many countries of the world, crimes can be prosecuted even if they're not committed in those countries, if they're international crimes, and even for crimes that committed in 1988 because they were international crimes at that time. And so what we've done in other situations, like for instance in Syria, where we've had, of course, a regime under Assad that was strongly supported by Iran and by its militia Hezbollah, and one of the reasons that a vicious dictator was able to stay in power so long and to kill 500,000 of his own people and essentially destroy half the country, drive off half the population, engage in mass murder and mass disappearance, torture, use of chemical weapons, etc. Even while that regime lasted, and of course we know it fell thanks to the Syrian people themselves last December, we were able to hold some of his torturers to account in courtrooms in Germany, in France, in Scandinavia, and other cases are pending around the world, even one against Assad himself. Obviously now we have a chance for justice in Syria, by the Syrian people, and I strongly support that. But you can begin cases like that, and you can prosecute them. And it's very important that countries be prepared to assist each other and also to resist the kind of pressure, for instance, that Sweden faced when it was forced to give up one of those executioners that it convicted. So that's the kind of resolution that it takes if we're going to achieve justice in this situation and send a clear message to the leaders of Iran if they were going to do these kinds of crimes again. And we have the FARS agency, for the Revolutionary Guard, saying that this is a time again for these same kinds of mass executions. We need to clearly send a message that anyone that commits or participates in that kind of crime will not have a day of rest in this life.
So another thing is that right now, just mentioned to it, we have been seeing that the regime has ramped up suppression since the end of the conflict, the 12-day war that we had in Iran. How do you perceive that, and can you elaborate on that? Because you wrote about this, the regime's recent rampant executions.
Well, clearly the regime is using its own weakness, not to go after its external enemies, but to rather turn its attention on people that don't support its enemies, who support Iran and support a free Iran. But those are the people that it's vulnerable to. Iran, I think, has nothing. I mean, the possibility that there could be external intervention would be a disaster for Iran. It's the people of Iran that needs to make the change. And indeed, as we've seen in the demonstrations in 2019 and in 2022, and we see in the failure of this government even to be able to run the electricity and provide the necessities to its population, there's enormous opposition to it, and that's what the regime fears. So it will use the foreign enemies as an excuse to go after people that have nothing to do with the foreign enemies that support Iran and want democracy in Iran. That change is always possible, and it's happened in various countries, and it seems like regimes are forever until they're not forever, and indeed until they fall. And I could go through the dozens of cases like that. But when finally, even within the rot within the regime becomes recognized, even by some of the people that are propping it up, and realizing that this isn't a government that's serving the people of the country. And so that's the only time that you have real regime change that's permanent and serves the interests of people is when they do it themselves. External intervention, as we've seen in other situations, has enormous negative consequences, and often allows very bad regimes to wrap themselves in the flag and say they're fighting for the country and for the motherland, when in fact they're fighting for themselves. So we need to do everything we can to assist the people inside with efforts at justice and documentation, and by isolation, and by making this regime a pariah, so that it can't get out of the box that it's in. And sadly, I think what often happens in the Iranian context, it's happened before. There may be a moderate or so-called moderate that we know in Iran. I think it's always the supreme theocratic leader, who controls everything. The pressure should not be let up. Justice should not be traded away, and there should be an insistence on change in Iran. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be an international pariah, and those who are implicated in its crimes and those that are complicit in its crimes will be held to account. Well, I'm very attracted by the 10 Points Plan. I mean, it's a democratic platform. By that I mean one that represents the people. It recognizes that human rights are universal. They're not just for people in certain countries. They're for people everywhere, and rejects the death penalty, rejects restoration of monarchy, that kind of approach. It calls for a democratic solution. And in other situations where we've had transitions, we haven't had the opposition or those that gain power speak so forcefully in favor of these principles. And there's often situations where one dictator follows another, looks like a savior, and quickly follows the sort of playbook, uses the same prisons, the same shackles, the same tools to torture those that oppose a new regime. And I think this particular program, gives us on the outside, I think, great hope that when we have a transition in Iran, it will be for the benefit of all of the people. My message to those that are carrying on the fight within the country, that they should keep up their courage, we're all united, I think, in our country on the need for democratic change and on our support for the efforts to create that change. And I want to say that in terms of our own commitment, this is not a sometime thing. This isn't just for a conference or a release or an open letter. This is a continued thing. Certainly, as long as I live, this will be a priority of mine to make sure that justice is achieved for the people of Iran.
Thank you very much.
Okay.